I can assure you, an open civil war will take place in Iraq. Even I will carry a gun and go and fight.
One of the easy solutions here for the United States and its allies would simply be to blow up these trucks.
Marwan is one of more than 140 Syrian Kurdish schoolboys kidnapped by ISIS 4 months ago.
What we've seen is individuals in Syria reaching directly into the United States, starting in public chats.
Many attribute the quick success of ISIS to its extensive financial resources, earning it the title of the richest terrorist organization in the world. But where does that money come from? ISIS oil funds roots. One of ISIS's greatest sources of funds stems from oil. The terrorist organization controls dozens of oil fields in both Iraq and Syria. In September 2015, ISIS captured the last oil field under Syrian President Assad's control.
The important thing here is that this indicates that there's a really strong demand for fuel in ISIS territory.
The fuel required to sustain their operations.
That also means, though, they're responsible for providing for the people in that territory, and that means they need fuel.
Activist organizations such as Raqqa is being slaughtered silently, which covertly reports on the violent and oppressive behavior of ISIS in the Syrian city, claims that the sale of ISIS's captured energy resources, such as electricity and gas, to the ruling regime of Syria is one of ISIS's greatest sources of revenue. According to the U.S. Treasury Department, as of 2014, ISIS made between $1 to $2 million per day in oil smuggling revenue. Some 2015 estimates place ISIS's monthly income at $40 million. In addition to revenue generated, as of late 2020, ISIS also had access to an estimated $25 to $50 million in cash reserves. At $40 per barrel in 2014, ISIS has always sold its oil below market rate, compared to the world price average of $80 per barrel in 2014. According to IHS, a data-driven analytical firm that monitors ongoing conflicts, the U.S.-led coalition's airstrikes targeting ISIS-controlled oil wells caused the price of its oil to fluctuate between $25 to $60 per barrel.
One of the easy solutions here for the United States and its allies would simply be to blow up these trucks.
By striking these types of facilities, we reduce their ability to generate the funds.
Militant Sunni group ISIS have taken control of Iraq's largest oil refinery.
American officials have been reluctant to do that so far, and they've been reluctant because it's not clear.
If they don't have anywhere to refine it and they don't have anywhere to sell it, then it becomes almost useless to them.
Who would be killed in such an attack are themselves members of ISIS.
So even though the quality of oil generated from these regions is not great, ISIS still makes a couple of millions a day from selling it simply because the rate is very competitive. ISIS's oil empire stretches across a landmass roughly the size of the UK and contains around 300 oil wells in Iraq alone. By contrast, ISIS possesses about 60% of Syria's total production capacity, which, before the civil war kicked into high gear, produced around 385,000 barrels a day, according to the Iraq Energy Institute. In total, ISIS produced roughly 3 million barrels of oil per day in 2014. ISIS smuggles oil and fuel from energy facilities in its captured cities into neighboring countries such as Saudi Arabia, Iran, Jordan, Kuwait, and Turkey. Southern Turkey in particular, where oil is expensive, has a large market for ISIS's low price per barrel. Some within Iraqi Kurdistan have been accused of and arrested for facilitating the smuggling of oil and fuel into Turkey. Bribery, greed, and desperation allow ISIS smuggling networks to thrive. Despite not knowing the full extent of ISIS's funding capability, the U.S. and its coalition partners are working to disrupt ISIS trade routes, target foreign states and individuals that finance ISIS, and destroy ISIS's oil fields by bombing pipelines and refineries. A report by the International Energy Agency in Paris found that coalition airstrikes reduced ISIS's oil production from 70,000 to 20,000 barrels a day in 2014.
ISIS has grander ambitions. It actually wants to control territory.
Funds from terrorist activities. Potentially more profitable than oil revenue is ISIS's local criminal and terrorist activities in and around its controlled territories. Such activities include robbing banks, selling illegal drugs, looting, illegally selling stolen artifacts, and extorting local civilians and businesses through imposed taxes. According to Bronstein and Griffin, under its former guise as ISI, the organization was primarily financed through domestic criminal activity within the borders of Iraq. ISIS now exploits these existing criminal networks to finance its caliphate. For example, Mosul was a source of income for ISIS long before its takeover of the city in 2014. Prior to capturing Mosul, ISIS was already earning $12 million a month in the city alone. The pillage of Mosul's central bank purportedly provided ISIS with an additional $425 million. When ISIS overran Mosul, they literally took necklaces off women and earrings off their ears. They also went after livestock, furniture, and cars. Their pillage of high-value items extends well beyond local banks and citizens. ISIS has notoriously looted and destroyed high-value archaeological sites. The terrorist group controls over 4,000 of Iraq's 12,000 important archaeological sites. Once under their control, ISIS has either symbolically destroyed or peddled off these priceless artifacts. Taxing and extortion. Taxation of the local population also brings in hundreds of millions of dollars. Citizens are taxed for operating businesses, importing or exporting goods, using internet cafes, or for using public goods like highways, phones, and electricity. ISIS even taxes groups, providing genuine humanitarian aid in its own war zone, and Iraqi government employees are taxed at a rate of roughly 50% of their salary. In total, ISIS makes approximately $1 million per day from taxes and extortion. Iraq is also agriculturally rich. The United Nations estimates that land in Iraq under ISIS control accounts for up to 40% of the country's annual production of wheat. This means that ISIS has access to revenue from wheat sales. This allows the organization to reward supporters with food and punish dissenters with starvation. Furthermore, ISIS's sweeping campaign has allowed it to seize control of key resources like dams and granaries, also controlling their distribution to the locals. Kidnapping for ransom. Another activity that provides ISIS with considerable revenue is kidnapping for profit. By 2014, kidnapping ransoms accounted for roughly 20% of ISIS's funding, with the U.S. Treasury Department quoting an annual income of $20 million. While both the United States and the UK refused to pay ISIS ransom money for captured citizens, notable among these were American journalists Jim Foley and Steven Sotloff.
Marwan is one of more than 140 Syrian Kurdish schoolboys kidnapped by ISIS 4 months ago. His mother wipes her tears when we ask about the moment they were reunited. Kidnapped on their way home from final exams, according to the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights.
Many European governments are known to pay, even if that fact is not publicly admitted. Some researchers estimate that France has paid $14 million for the release of its citizens, and that Spain is also believed to have paid ISIS ransoms for its journalists. Those victims whose ransoms are not paid are slain, often publicly, and their slayings are recorded in ISIS's infamous punishment videos. However, payment of the ransom is not a guarantee of release either. This allows for additional unwelcome ambiguity for victims and their families.
The family is from Kobani, a town under siege by ISIS for 2 weeks. He is among the 70 or so released in the last few days. I couldn't believe it.
Stolen U.S. humanitarian donations. Donations from private donors and governments sometimes are laundered through feigned humanitarian aid organizations and unregistered charities. Labeled as humanitarian aid to war-torn areas in Syria and Iraq, many of these difficult-to-track funds go directly to ISIS. ISIS utilizes social media to spread propaganda to raise funds. Many of these social media channels are in English. Israeli cyber intelligence has acknowledged that IS is using the digital currency Bitcoin for fundraising from U.S. territories. Former Undersecretary of the U.S. Treasury, Jimmy Gurul, explained that Bitcoin is not regulated in the U.S., so unsurprisingly, many donors using Bitcoin are from the U.S. Some fundraisers in Kuwait operate under the disguise of raising funds for orphans and refugees. Such a strategy makes it difficult to distinguish between legitimate funds for those in need and fake donations destined for groups like ISIS. In 2014, Kuwait provided the most uncommitted aid to Syria. Uncommitted aid is funds that do not have a guaranteed recipient. Qatar is also guilty of uncommitted aid. The financial tracking service reported the nation sent $11 million in charitable donations to unspecified locations. Few established worldwide humanitarian agencies have genuine links to the region, As a result, any donations to smaller humanitarian aid groups provide no guarantee that they will actually reach genuine aid workers in the region. Therefore, a majority of these uncommitted aid funds are going to groups like ISIS, al-Nusra, or other criminal organizations that would be inappropriate or illegal to support overtly. Some countries, such as Saudi Arabia, have banned all unauthorized donations to Syria to prevent groups like ISIS from exploiting the confusion and desperate humanitarian needs of the country to amass funds. Donations from U.S. citizens. Over the years, there are Americans that have been caught and even sentenced to prison for supporting ISIS financially from U.S. soil. Most recently in 2022,
Whoa, that's really destroyed down in there.
That message is resonating. The Canadian government has identified 30 Canadians now fighting in Syria and Iraq.
One of the most dangerous is social media.
A U.S. citizen who moved his family to Syria to join the Islamic State terrorist group was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison. Emran Ali, 55 years old, a U.S. citizen born in Trinidad and Tobago, was sentenced in federal court, according to court records. He pleaded guilty in November 2022 to conspiring to provide material support to a foreign terrorist organization. Ali moved his family to Trinidad and Tobago, to Brazil, and then to Turkey and eventually Syria in March 2015. He falsely told his children that they were going on vacation.
I can assure you, an open civil war will take place in Iraq. Even I will carry a gun and go and fight.
They're using it successfully to spot, assess, identify, target folks.
It wasn't that we were blind in that area. We had drones, we had satellites, we had intelligence.
We've seen across the globe kids as young as 13 recruited by ISIL.
Can claim Baghdad, we are coming.
It is becoming a matter of some urgency to push ISIS back.
What we've seen is individuals in Syria reaching directly into the United States, starting in public chats.
But actually intended to join ISIS. Ali eventually became a merchant and began buying and selling livestock, cars, weapons, weapons accessories, and telephones to and from other ISIS members. Ali also provided money remitting services to other Trinidadian IS fighters in Syria and donated his own money to ISIS members to support the ISIS cause. Ali's is one story, but countless other stories like his have emerged over the years where people have dedicated their life to the terrorist group. That's all for today, folks. We'll see you next time.